All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started.
Roll
Kitty,
call.
ready? There you go.
Yep, roll call. The Councilmember Morel.
Here.
present. Councilmember Jeruso.
Here.
Present. Councilmember Harris. Here. Councilmember King, absent. Councilmember Green is present, and let the record reflect that Councilmember Moreno is in, attendance.
All right, first up, we are going to the approval of the minutes from December 13th meeting. I will move for the approval of the minutes. Can I get a second? Second by Councilmember Green. Please vote your machines. 3 yeas, no nays. The minutes taken up and approved. Next up, we are going to go out of order and take up item number 5 first. Councilman Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the upcoming ordinances that we have to do with work that we've been doing with the Office of Inspector General and Mr. Michelle, who is with us today, along with his staff. And it has to do with putting in place certain safeguards around procurement. And these safeguards are really a result of the findings from the Inspector General's recent report on the procurement around the Smart Cities project. As you all may recall from seeing the report, he did find some potential violations of several local and state laws by city employees around this procurement, including false swearing and filing or maintaining false public records, among others. So with that, Mr. Michelle, I'll turn it over to you and your team so you can do your presentation on what your report found, along with giving us an overview of some of the ordinances that we worked on. Good morning.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Ed Michelle. I'm the Inspector General. And to my left is Mike Laughlin, my General Counsel. I'd like to thank the City Council today for the invitation to speak about our Smart Cities report, as well as some of the initiatives of the Office of Inspector General. I'd also like to thank the Council for its prompt and thorough action regarding our recommendations to mitigate fraud, waste, and abuse about these proposed ordinances today. The Office of Inspector General, as you know, has independent and objective oversight of the city's $1.4 billion in revenue, as well as $7.8 billion in total assets.
Hang on, Mr. Michelle. We're trying to get some better audio for you. It's a little low.
Okay, how's that? Sound better? So for 2023, the OIG mitigated risk at an unprecedented level. And last year, we identified or recovered more than 4.2 million in connection with wasteful or fraudulent spending, while our budget was only $3.2 million as we issued 17 audits, reports, or evaluations and investigations, something that also has not been done. Common procurement fraud schemes include bidder collusion, false invoices, as well as bribery and corruption. The choice targeted industries for procurement fraud are construction, legal services, telecommunications, port, and airline services. Given that the city spends more than $300 million each year in association with procurement, it is incumbent upon us to mitigate fraud, waste, and abuse where and when we find it. I believe these proposed ordinances will assist us in this endeavor. The Smart Cities investigation was initiated based on allegations of unethical or improper actions by city employees and others in the preparation and issuance of the request for proposal regarding advanced broadband and smart city systems. The City Council issued Resolution 22-201 requesting our office conduct an inquiry into this procurement practice. However, notwithstanding this request, the OIG had previously initiated an investigation regarding the awarding of this RFP. Some of the violations associated with our inquiry include revised statutes 14-125, which Council President Moreno just mentioned, which involves false swearing. One is 1433, which is false swearing and maintaining false public records, as well as participation in certain transactions. We also reviewed the Home Rule Charter, specifically Section 93009, involving prohibited acts by city employees, as well as City Code 269-1 and 2-692, which involves financial statements, as well as the contents of financial statements of all city employees. Our report was taken to the City Council, as well as the Chief Administrative Officer, the Louisiana Board of Ethics, and District Attorney for any actions that they deem necessary. The 26-page report, including the 38 exhibits, are online, but I would like to mention some of the notable facts of this investigation before I proceed to the proposed ordinances and how those proposed ordinances would help us in the mitigation of fraud, waste, and abuse. On April 18th, 2022, Julian Meyer attended a meeting during which he learned that George Burciaga, the CEO of Ignite, had a financial interest in Smart Plus Connected City. The entity to whom this contract was being awarded. I believe once these ordinances are enacted, part of the mitigation strategy will help us before it gets to that point. Jonathan Rhodes and Christopher Wolf had a relationship with Qualcomm because their company, Verge Internet, was a member of the Qualcomm team. Rhodes and Wolf's relationship with Qualcomm, a member of the Smart Plus Connected Consortium, whose proposal was selected, may constitute a violation of the city's home rule charter, section 9309, which states no officer or employee of the city shall have a financial interest in any contract with the city. Wolf's conflict of interest statement made no mention of his ownership in Verge, any conversations with Burciaga about Verge Internet, or any possible future ventures as noted in the Qualcomm RFI narrative. Rhodes should have disclosed his interest in Verge Internet and his relationship with Qualcomm to the city on his 2021 financial disclosure, and Wolf should have done the same on his conflict of interest disclosure form for the Smart City RFP. George Burciaga, Rhodes, and Wolf, all three should have excluded themselves from participating in the Smart City RFP solicitation and the selection process because they had a relationship with Qualcomm. Rhodes may have violated Louisiana Revised Statutes 14-125 by making his 2021 sworn financial statement, making a written oral statement, which he should have known to be false under sanction of oath. Rhodes may have also violated 14-133 by filing his 2021 sworn financial statement with the city, establishing the criminal offense of filing or maintaining false public records. Wolf may have also violated RS 14-133 by filing with the city his June 24th, 2021 conflict of interest statement. Executive Order 2021 required that Wolf was a member of the selection committee for RFP and execute a disclosure certifying that he did not possess a conflict. Before I get into some of our recommendations, I'd like to go to the PowerPoint. Can you go to slide 2? So one of our recommendations was to ensure that all contracts be uploaded into BRASS and the provisions of City Code 2-1120 be included in the formal contract as well. As you know, Section 2-1120 requires the potential contractor to provide the Office of Inspector General with documents and information as requested. Failure to comply with this request constitutes a material breach of contract. This proposed ordinance reduces any ambiguity or omission which may enable individuals to evade the reporting requirements. In association with proper procurement protocols, including transparency, I believe this proposed ordinance allows for the full disclosure in the event of pro bono instances as well. You can go to slide 3. City Code 2-691 and -692 does not exempt a person from reporting an interest in a business that has no income. However, to provide further clarification, we recommend City Council revise City Code 2-692 subsection B, which establishes a dollar value category for the required disclosures to read $0 to $5,000 rather than less than $5,000. This amendment, if adopted, will ensure consequences for untruthful statements or careless completion of the annual financial disclosure. This amendment will also further eliminate the uncertainty if a business has no income or whether or not they should be included in a disclosure form at all. Lastly, this ordinance would allow for a review of potential conflicts prior to assignments of city employees, which could have, in this instance, have averted the potential conflict. You can go to slide 4. We recommended that all contracts be uploaded into BRASS in the provision of City Code 2-1120, which in part created the Office of Inspector General be also included in the contract. Again, this essentially requires the potential contractor to provide the Office of Inspector General with documents as requested. Failure to comply constitutes a material breach of contract, and this, we believe, highly encourages individuals or entities to cooperate with inquiries by the Office of Inspector General. In this instance, the procurement fraud in the procurement department could not locate the MOU between the city and Ignite Cities because it was not into the system. Ordinance 34509 would require that all contracts be uploaded within 10 days, which would, I believe, allow for greater transparency. I believe all of these ordinances would enable further mitigation of threats facing the city. And again, in closing, considering that we spend more than $300 million in association with procurement activities to ensure vital services for our citizens, I believe these ordinances would be helpful in our mitigation of the potential fraud, waste, and abuse. And I want to thank the City Council for listening to our report and acting on it to ensure that the limited resources we have are spent in an appropriate fashion. And I'll open it up.
Thank you, Mr. Michelle. I really appreciate the work of your office and your team with my staff on getting this all together. And we may have a couple other pieces of kind of cleanup legislation coming after this, but just kind of to walk everyone through the reasons as you just did as well, but just for some further explanation around why these ordinances are important. On slide 2, ordinance 34507, when we're talking about closing this loophole for pro bono or non-compensation to a vendor, we're talking about Ignite saying that they were volunteering their services. Is that what you're referring to at this point?
That's correct. The mere omission of participation in the form because they were merely donating their services does not preclude perhaps an entity from receiving a profit in the venture later on. And this would close that loop.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as you had mentioned, what was interesting about this Ignite contract is that as we, the council, initially had searched for any type of contractual agreement between the city and Ignite and contacted the law department, we were told there was no contract. There was nothing there. Only to later find out through the subpoena process that the council initiated to learn that there actually had been a contract. But for some reason, it was solely being housed within the mayor's office and had never been really transmitted to anyone else, not the law department, not anyone else. So I think the transparency piece to ensuring that all contracts end up in brass, not only is it beneficial to us council members, to you, the Inspector General, but very beneficial to the public as well, so that they understand who exactly the city is doing business with. On the next ordinance, which is slide 3, ordinance 34508, and this requires, let's see,
It's the
the
lowering of
disclosure
contract.
and saying that even if you're not having any income, and let's talk about why that is important. Through the testimony that we heard during the council's Smart Cities inquiry, we had heard from the city employees that while, you know, they may have been working with Qualcomm in another city, they weren't necessarily getting paid per se, right? Or that even though they had a company that was, you know, listed in documents for another project where Qualcomm was involved, that company hadn't made any money. And so this kind of leaves it where it's like, if you have any type of work that is occurring with another company, because you may be end up getting paid down the road. There could be promises down the road that you're going to get paid, that now your work is for free, but down the road, there could be additional promises. So I think that this also closes a very important loophole where we can find those work connections with potential contractors and city employees, even if at this time, they're not getting paid.
Yes, so the collusion process with potential bid rigging and the enormous amount of money, upwards of $300 to $400 million each year that the city pays, I believe this ordinance will ensure that our very limited and precious resources of the city will be spent in an efficient and effective manner, and participation in the brass system should be mandatory. We won't know what's being spent if we cannot pull up the inquiry and access the information digitally.
Agreed. All right, Councilmember Morrell, followed by Councilmember Jeruso.
Thank you, Council President. It's unfortunate we have to have ordinances like this because it goes back to that old adage, we often hear that common sense isn't all that common. I have heard over time a lot of criticism of the cost of the investigation the council did on smart cities. And I think between the Inspector General's report and all the things that we found out since then, none of that would have happened had these ordinances been in place and common sense had prevailed. The fact that the council had to subpoena and search through a wealth of different piles of information that were not centrally housed just to obtain facts and information, had these contracts been uploaded into brass, as all these contracts should have been a public record, wouldn't have had to have hired people to subpoena different departments to pry out of their dead hands documentation that all should have been a public record. It's a lot of the work the council has been doing, and particularly with Council President Moreno's work on with the OIG in this instance, is to put mechanisms in place so that in the future councils, future investigations won't require the amount of work, time, money, and effort wasted and spent to get information that should be easily accessible by anyone, including the public. I also think an important aspect of these ordinances is that it clears up the loophole of prospective payment or prospective opportunity. The reason why it's so important to have the disclosure of pro bono work is to the OIG and the council president's statement. If you're doing work for free because you might get work down the line, that's still a conflict. And frequently, whether you're in the private sector or public sector, there are often times where people will do work not being paid on the front end to make prospective payment down the line because they're trying to work to show value. So it's so important that we require these disclosures on the front end because those disclosures are the markers to make sure that there's no conflict taking place. If a person who has a relationship with a vendor is interacting with them and they're forced to disclose that they have a relationship, it just adds another layer of scrutiny so that that person interacting with that vendor knows this arrangement has to be on the up and up because everyone will know that there's a relationship. It's the same reason why council members often recuse themselves when something comes up that could be perceived to be a conflict. You have to have those disclosures. You have to set those markers so that people can know that everyone is above board and that everything is being done properly. So I really appreciate your work, Ed, working with the council president to put this legislation in place because it is important to rebuild public trust to make sure that we are taking these things seriously, but also to make it easier for future councils and future OIGs to get access to this information so that when an investigation takes place, it can be done more efficiently, quicker, and cheaper than it's been done currently. Thank you.
Yes, I believe the amount of resources that have been dedicated to researching and proposing and investigating what actually happened is a very small amount, which will yield great results later, given the fact that we are going to continue to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in the future on procurement fraud. I think it's a wise investment.
Councilmember Jeruso.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I just want to start by saying this is common sense legislation. And I want to thank you for bringing it. I sometimes don't love the idea that we have to legislate things that should be apparent and easy, but that's where we are today. Mr. Michelle, I did want to ask you with regards to OIG cooperation provisions, and I know this is in the context of smart cities, but if I remember correctly, you also had an issue with the former director of the Orleans Parish Communications District where you had to pursue the former director for a long time in the court system. And if my memory is correct, it was quite expensive doing that. Is that right?
That's correct. The Office of Inspector General spent upwards of about $55,000 just to get access to records from an entity that received millions of dollars from the city each year.
What I'm gonna propose, Madam Vice President, is that we maybe add an amendment when it goes to council about allowing the prevailing party to get attorney's fees. Because I think part of the issue is that people, whether they're an agency, an inside entity or outside, think that there's carte blanche to ignore these rules. And if it hits you in the pocketbooks, now if you send an overbroad subpoena and it's bad, then you need to pay the price. But I think it's skin in the game for everybody and to level set the playing field, if that's acceptable to you, ma'am.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I appreciate you discussing it with me as well. And absolutely, we can work on that. I think it's certainly a fair approach to that.
And I would like to stress that the subpoena power and the investigative power of the Office of Inspector General is very broad. But I would also like to remind everyone that we are very judicious in how we exercise our authority. In the instance that Council Member Druso was talking about, we discovered certain aberrant spending with regard to the OPCD expenditures. And we merely, our main goal is to always mitigate fraud, waste, and abuse through education and awareness. And when we are prohibited from just having a simple interaction about a potential expenditure, and then that entity then takes us to court and refuses to comply with any lawful request, I believe in those instances, it would be helpful if those entities realize that they may have to pay the price for those legal fees.
So we'll work on those amendments. So with that, I'm happy to run by each one of the amendments, Mr. Vice President, amendments, each one of the ordinances, Mr. Vice President, to move them forward to the full council. Or if we just want to just move them forward to the full council since I have amendments. And without a vote. That works? All right, we don't need to vote. And Joe, Councilmember Drew, so you and I'll work on the amendment together along with your office, Mr. Michelle. Thank you so much for your work. Very much appreciated. Any public comment, Anita? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, next up, we will revert to the normal agenda. So we're on number 3. First up, the City Planning Commission appointment, that'll be deferred to the next meeting. That date has not been firmly set yet for our next full meeting, but we will take up the City Planning Commission appointment at that future meeting. Next up, we have HDLC, which is B. First up, we have Mark Elam. Come on over. Mr. Elam, I will ask you the same question I ask everyone, which is, why do you want to be on the HDLC?
Well, council member, good morning. First off, I'm not sure if you know or don't know, but I am a licensed contractor. I live in a historic property, and I care about the preservation of historic property in this city. It's very important to me. I've renovated several historic properties, and it's something that I truly care about. So for that reason, I'm honored to serve.
Your form is complete. There is one comment, I believe.
Yes, we have one comment from, Ralph House. He says, I believe that the HDLC should encompass a body of people who are experienced in historic preservation and or experience working with developments in preservation. Mark Elam is a political attorney / campaign consultant with no experience in either historic preservation, historic districts, or in developing historic properties. We should not expose these commissions with political influence if we are to keep the integrity of our historic districts.
All right.
Like to comment
Okay.
in response to that. Thank you, Mr. Elam, for your service. The very fact that you're interested in serving and that you have experienced renovations relative to the contracting work that you do is a good combination. Sometimes it's good to have someone to come from a different perspective to serve on a board that has individual and specific responsibilities here. We are all political in some way with regards to if we get involved with certain entities. But it's important that if you're going to come before us and put forward your desire to serve, and especially if I'm involved with the process of nominating you, when something is said that I think I understand the opinion of the person who spoke, but it's also important to recognize that this is an unpaid position where you can certainly learn to participate in the processes that are part of this organization. But I just appreciate your willingness to serve. And if it's the desire of the council to have you serve, I know that you will serve very well.
Well, thank you, council member. And listen, it's an unfortunate set of comments. However, although we all are some political in some capacity, again, I've lived in Tremay for 7 years. I've owned property in Tremay, all of which is historic for over 10. And I've done construction work and been a licensed contractor for about 10 years.
Okay, at this time, the board is clear. Your form is correct and in order. Mr. Green moves, Councilman Jericho seconds. Vote your machines. 4 yeas, no nays. You'll be forwarded to full council for confirmation. Thank you, Mr. Elam, for being here today. Thank you. Next up, Jen Ashby Jr. Does he have a waiver in? Okay, let me make sure I have his waiver. I'm sure I do. Let me see. All right, yep, his waiver request is in, so it has been approved by the council member who is making his appointment. So, Councilman Harris moves, Councilman Drew seconds, please vote your machines. 4 yeas, no nays. Mr. Ashby is forward to the full council for consideration. And next up, we have Wendy, Section C, Municipal Yacht Harbor Management Corporation. We have Wendy Washington. Ms. Washington, same question. Why do you want to be on the Municipal Yacht Harbor Board?
Well, I'm a sociologist and an ethnographer in real world, and how we navigate people living in an area with the built environment just needs community outreach to see how we can coexist together. I think my work background and just being from the city brings me interest in it for many reasons.
Okay. Your form is in and it is correctly filled out. So Councilman Green moves, I will second. All in favor, vote your machines. 4 yeas, no nays. Is forward to full council for approval. Thank you.
Thank you for your willingness to serve.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
All right. Next up, we have Mr. Ryan Jason Banks. Come on up. Same question.
Good morning. I just believe in the city of New Orleans, and I do believe that areas that have public areas should have a diverse and knowledgeable board. And I offer myself a service because I think I can bring that to this board.
Okay. That answers the question. Your form is correctly filled out and complete. I'll entertain a motion. Motion by Councilman Druso, second by Councilman Harris. Please vote your machines. 4 yeas, no nays. You are moved to the full council for confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bo. This is D, the Sanford, Sandy, Krasnoff, New Orleans Criminal Justice Council.
Good morning. Having devoted about the last 40 years to philanthropy, I can't think of anything more important than working on crime and criminal justice. So that's the reason I'd like to be on the committee again and do whatever I can to help the city with that in that way.
Okay. Your form is completely filled out and correctly submitted. Moved by Mr. Druso, seconded by myself. Please vote your machines. 4 yeas, no nays. You'll move full council for confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a waiver for Ms. Shilstone. It was received less than 24 hours, so I need a suspension. I will move to suspend the rules to accept this waiver. Take a second. Second by Councilmember Harris. Please vote your machines. All right, the rules are suspended. We have a waiver that was properly received and is complete. I will move to forward Ms. Shilstone to the full council for confirmation. All right. That is 4 yeas, no nays. She is moved to full council for consideration. Next up, we have item 4, which is discussion and consideration of an ordinance by myself dealing with the regulation of throws during carnival season. Many of you have probably already followed us on social media. Last year, we did a variety of different changes to the Mardi Gras ordinance to deal with throws and a variety of other things. Inside of those ordinances, we had some language that dealt with a particular type of throw, which is toilet paper. I had the pleasure of working with the crew of Tux. Mr. Frischert is here. Come on, Mr. Frischert to talk. But we are trying to work out, we've worked out for the most part, we have worked out a compromise so that Tux can continue to do its signature throw. As I said on social media, I think that when you are a crew that revolves around toilets, throwing toilet paper is probably appropriate. We're just trying to make sure that's done in a way that is both environmentally conscious and also just, as I said on social media, contrary to popular belief, when many throws do not dissolve properly, they do clog up the pipes. So we're working together to find a path forward, and this ordinance does just that. Do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Just briefly, we obviously appreciate the work we have with you, sanitation, Parkway, and the city coming up with this solution. It maintains a over half-century tradition that I believe is an integral part of Mardi Gras. And it also reduces, if not eliminates, any ill effects. And we have been working for 9 months identifying the most degradable toilet paper that is possible. We have tested, our vendor and a testing company tested them. We've scientifically looked into it. The porousness of the toilet paper is the main issue. We're going to throw the absolute best. We've also cut down our quantity by 50%. So we're working with the city. We want to be a good citizen, and we want to make Mardi Gras as good as it's always been, if not better.
Okay, and there's going to be an amendment we're working on to give y'all a little more flexibility as y'all continue to find better vendors. So this will not go on consent because it will require an amendment. But I appreciate you working with us, and we want Tux to keep,
Thank you.
staying on their thrones.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Councilman Harris for comment.
Yeah, I just want to say this is probably one of the funniest conversations that we've had in chambers about biodegradable toilet paper to be thrown at Mardi Gras.
All right. With that, there's no vote required. Thank you, Mr. Pritchard, for being here today. I believe, we had a comment on that.
Yeah, we have one comment. This is from Ann DeMont Lutz Farmer. She says, I've lived at 719 Napoleon Avenue since 1981, which is located on the Uptown Parade route. I'm writing to object to making an exception to the crew of Tux to be able to continue throwing toilet paper. The toilet paper not only litters the trees, it litters our yards, and not only that weekend, but for weeks afterwards. The homeowners then are left with messy cleanup. I have known this crew practically since its inception. I remember it as a rowdy college crew parading past my family home on Palmer Avenue. I watched it during their float load up in front of my house on Napoleon Avenue and failing to provide cleanup for the leftover boxes and trash. I had to contact the captain with the threat of media exposure, and now the cleanup is wonderful. However, no crew can provide the cleanup for the toilet paper in our yards. We all grow up, and at 50 years, I'm a member of the Tulane 1973 class. The Tux crew should have matured enough to show their satire in ways that are not causing the neighborhoods who host them so much personal mess. I therefore ask that no exceptions are allowed. And DeMont Lutz Farmer, a parade host for 43 years.
Thank you very much. That concludes our agenda. There'll be no vote on that item as we'll be doing amendments before full council vote. So I believe that clears our agenda. I'll move to adjourn. Second by Councilmember Green. All in favor? It's unanimous, 5 votes. We are adjourned. Sorry, 4 votes. We are adjourned. Thank you.